All right, so the window object we've looked at a few times, and I think it was the execution context section where I showed you that that's the first thing the execution context does is it loads this global window object that has a ton of properties and methods and APIs and also events. Now, the first events that I want to talk about are page loading events on this window object. So you'll notice that in the HTML for this section or for this lesson, I have the script tag in the head. And this was something that was very common practice back in like the 2000s. So I just want to show you if we keep the script tag in the head and then we select, let's say query selector, and all I have on this page is just an H1 and some paragraphs. So I'm going to select the H1 and I'll set the text content to hello world, and I'm going to save. So you'll notice that we get an error in the console that says cannot set properties of null setting text content. So what it's saying is that this is null, and the reason for that is when we put our script tag in the head like this, we're running our JavaScript before the page is loaded and before the DOM is loaded, so it doesn't know what this is yet. So a common practice would be to use the load event. So we could say on window, we could say .add. Actually, I'll show you the onload, which was what we saw a lot of back then. So window.onload, and this was kind of a hack to do window onload, set it to a function, and then put our code in there. So you'll see if I save now, the H1 is replaced and we don't get an error anymore. So by using onload, we're waiting for the entire page to load, and that includes resources like images and stuff like that. And of course, we could use add event listener, which wasn't around back then when I'm talking about, but you can use this with load as well. So we'll just put a function in here, and let's just copy that and paste that in. I'll comment that out, and you'll see that, just get rid of that semicolon, that does the same thing. Now there's also an event called DOM content loaded. So what I'm going to do is copy this and then paste it in. I'm going to change load to DOM, all caps, and then content loaded. And then I'll save, and we get the same result. Now the difference between load and DOM content loaded is load waits for the entire page to load, including all resources such as images, where DOM content loaded runs as soon as the DOM is parsed and loaded. So if I were to run both of these, let's actually, you know what we'll do is, let's just replace this with a console log. So I'm going to say console log, and we'll say page loaded, and then I'm going to replace this one with a console log, and we'll say here DOM, what happened here? Let's say DOM loaded. And notice that the DOM gets loaded first, obviously, because the page load includes the DOM and everything else. Obviously, there's no images here, but any other resources that need to be loaded. Now, if I were to do a console log in the global scope down here, and we'll just say run me, if I save that, that gets run before either of these, because we're not in any of these events where we're waiting for the page to load, which is fine when the script is down, under the page, down above the ending body tag. But if you have to access any DOM elements from the global scope, then you're going to get an error if the script tag is in the head. Now, the exception to this is if you use the fairly new defer attribute. So if I come to the script that's in the head here and then I add on to it defer like that, and I save, and then let's come over here and we'll take, let's just go back into the global scope here and say document, and we'll select the H1, and then let's set the inner text and set that to hello world. And if I save that, you'll notice that it works. Okay, so I'm not getting the error, even though my script is in the head, but I use this defer attribute, which basically will do just that. It will defer the JavaScript code from running until it can run, until the pages or the DOM is loaded. So this is pretty new. I don't know when exactly this was available, but if you want to do it this way and put your scripts in the head, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure you use defer. I still prefer to keep my scripts down above the ending body tag, but from this point on, if you want to use defer and put them in the head, that's fine. Now there's just a couple other events that I want to show you that we can use on the window. So let's say window.add event listener, and we can listen for a resize. Okay, so there's a resize event, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually take this and move this into here, but I'm going to set the text to show the size of the window. So we'll put some backticks in here, and we'll say resized to, and we can remember we can get the inner width and the inner height on the window object. So let's say window dot inner width, and then we'll also put the window dot inner height. So I'm going to save that, and now if I resize, it's going to change the H1 to show the inner width and inner height, and you'll see it keeps changing because that event just fires off every time the browser is resized. Also, it stayed at 276 because we didn't change the height. If I move this console, then that's going to change the height. All right, now we can also listen for a scroll event, so this can be helpful for certain UI effects that you want to create. So I'm going to add an event listener onto the window, and I'm going to listen for scroll. And of course you could do window dot on scroll equals a function if you want to do it like that. And then let's create a function, and what I'm going to do is console log, and we'll use some backticks, and we'll say scrolled, and let's add in here, because on the window object we have access to scroll X, which is the position when you're scrolling horizontal, and then we also have the scroll Y, so window dot scroll Y. And now if I scroll down, you'll see the X is going to stay at 0 because I'm not scrolling horizontal at all, but the more I scroll down, you'll see the higher that scroll Y value gets. And we could do some cool stuff here, like if you have a navigation bar at the top and you want to have it be like translucent or something when you start to scroll, you can just test where that scroll Y value is. So in fact, we could do something like this. We could say if the window dot scroll Y is, let's say, greater than 70, then let's take the document body, and on the style we'll take the color, or let's do background, so background color, and we'll set that to black, and then we'll set the color to white, the text color. So change that to color. All right, if I do that and then I start to scroll, as soon as it hits 70, the background turns black. Now it's going to stay black because I didn't specify anything else, but I could put an else on here, and then we could take this and then just change this back to white and change the text back to black. So now if I come down, I hit 70, it turns black. I go back up, it turns white. So this is the start of learning how to create really cool dynamic functionality or dynamic effects within your UI. So what else? We also have focus and blur. And just to give you a quick example of that, we'll say window.add event listener. And just like you have on inputs, we focus and blur. It's just when you click in and when you click out. So let's just mess around with this for a second. And let's take document.query selector, and we'll select the paragraph. Actually, let's select all paragraphs. So we'll say all, and then let's loop through those. So we'll say for each P, so for each paragraph. Then let's say p.style.color and set that to blue. And then let's put one for blur, So on blur, which is when you click out of the window, then we'll set it to black, back to black. So now if I click in here, you can see the scroll thing's still working too, but you can see that it's all blue. If I click outside of the window, so anywhere else, then it turns black, back to black. And there's other events on the window object as well. If you want to check the MDN docs, of course you can do that. But yeah, so those are window events and also the page loading events.